Yes, how are you guys? How's everybody doing today? Of course, this is a Tuesday. And with it being Tuesday, guess what? It is another podcast, the Alpha Mindset. Absolutely. This is a topic that it has layers. And of course, before we move forward, my wonderful cohort, beautiful cohort, Miss Bridget Gibson. How are you, Bridget? How are you?
I'm doing great, Doc. How are you tonight?
I'm doing really well. Tuesday, beautiful day. All is well. Health as well. So all is well.
Good. I'm excited about tonight's show.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Tonight, we're going to kind of talk about some things involving, ego and pride. There's a saying that men's nature is nature and ego, and women's nature is, of course, the nature of pridefulness. And we're going to kind of talk about that.
Okay.
I mean, Miss Bridget, what did we title it tonight? How could we tie all this in? What are we talking about tonight?
Do women lead with pride, and do men lead with ego?
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some aspects and facets of it. Try to break it down into some simple terms. And I think it's going to be pretty insightful. I'm going to play a clip. Now, before we segue into that, I'm going to play a clip that a beautiful lady kind of broke it down in layman's terms. And I thought it was pretty insightful. So we're going to play the clip, Ms. Bridget, and let's listen to it, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Shown ourselves. And I've come to realize that women are very, very prideful. Like, men have egos, but women are very prideful. And the reason why we have a hard time being shown who we are is because the opposite of pride is shame. And we don't want to feel that shame because it is very painful. Wow. But let me tell you something. You have nothing to be shameful about simply because you're imperfect. We are all imperfect. The best gift, one of the best gifts you can give your husband is when he says, babe, this is how I'm feeling. This is what I see in you. This is where you can improve. This is the adjustments I think that you can make, is to sit back and think about it. And then say, you know what, babe, I can see where I could do better in that area. You're right. I'm sorry for making you feel that way. I don't want you to feel that way. Right? Eat it. Because that's going to give you the relationship you're actually fighting for.
Wow. So what do you think about that, Bridget? What do you think about her reaction?
It's a lot to unpack there, Doc, because being a strong Black woman like myself, I was raised to just kind of push through things, just kind of, stand up for yourself. Don't let anybody tell you anything that, that puts you down. Have high self-esteem. So I'm not quite sure about the shame part. You might can help me with that.
Well, a lot of times with pride and ego, we tend to want to lean to the positive aspects of it because we won't hold ourselves to the truth. We get kind of biased and we will project pride and ego on other people.
Okay.
It's one thing to be prideful, but then you're so prideful that you don't open up. You're so prideful that you won't apologize. You're so prideful that you want things your way. You're so prideful that you believe that strength comes with detachment. And there's a lot of strength in being accommodating and cooperative. There's a lot of strength in bending and ebbing and flowing with a person. And a lot of times that's even expressed with men when it comes to ego, because a lot of times with men and their and our egotistical ways, a lot of times we think that we can handle everything. We want to control everything. Sometimes we take leverage in the form of manipulation, where we control resources. And because we want to control the resources, we feel that we have the last say just because. And a lot of times when it's expressed in an egotistical way, it can be detrimental. So I know that this lady was talking about some of the problematic aspects when a woman is prideful and is really detached emotionally because she's so quote unquote strong. And when a man is imbalanced because he is self-centered in ego. And so that's what I kind of saw and listened to when I watched the video, but of course in this audio that I played for the audience, that's what I heard.
I agree with you. And it's sometimes it can get a little sticky because both parties are standing their ground and no one wants to bend. And
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where the issues come in, when who's going to take the first, who's going to say, okay, I'm wrong, let me take a step back and look at what's going on. I think we get
Absolutely.
into this battle of the gender war. Who, are you going to just sit back and let me take over? Are you going to submit? And it's a submission thing to me, and I have a problem sometimes with the word submit.
Well, I think in this day and time, and it's kind of, unfortunate. In this day and time of social media, we are basing everything on definition.
Mm-hmm.
But people embody definitions. Definitions don't
Mm-hmm.
embody people. Definitions have context. Submission in what context? Because we're talking about submission in the context of obedience, not submissive in the context of being subhuman to another human. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about both parties being obedient to the commitment of the relationship. They're dutiful in their commitment to the relationship outside of the feelings that come with it. Of course, in a relationship, love is the baseline. Absolutely. You love your wife or your husband or your boyfriend, girlfriend. You love them. Yes, you do. And that's going to always be the foundation. However, are you committed to the relationship that has to weather the storm? Because you're never going to get your way all the time. You're not going to always get along. And sometimes you're going to have to be at peace, even under duress. When things are at their worst, you're going to have that spiritual bonding that goes beyond what the personal needs and wants of each other. This is an interdependent relationship that leads to health, not an independent relationship where we easily get offended with each other.
Well, sometimes I really believe that the scales are unbalanced sometimes. And I think whomever is on the lower end build up a resentment toward the other. And that can happen over years of time being together. And you'll find a couple that are just not communicating well at all because of suppression of their emotions. What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, communication is key. You have to be a great communicator. Even when the conversation is going to be uncomfortable, you have to be willing to communicate. You have to be able to speak tactfully and respectfully. Because all conversations are not going to be just peaches and cream. You're going to have to, like a working example would be, you know, honey, I need to talk to you. And I know this is going to be an uncomfortable conversation, but I really don't want you to hold this against me. I really want to talk to you about some things because I'm uncomfortable. I don't feel well about something. To be able to speak to someone with a proper demeanor, with respect and honor to the fact of who you're talking to. You could be upset with a person. And I'm going to talk about this possibly in a future podcast. There are 13 steps that I've developed to knowing how to have an argument with your loved one. And we're going to talk about it since we're bringing that up. We're going to talk about how to properly engage in an argument. Because I think
that's going to be really good. Yeah. Because people do hit below the belt sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's hard to come back at some time after that.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
And that's where the pride and the ego comes in, because we have a hard time. Some of us have a hard time admitting when we're wrong and owning up to the accountability that we have to have. Because if we're husband and wife, or if we're in an intimate, committed relationship, we have a responsibility to be accountable.
Exactly.
No matter what rules we set, we still have to be responsible and accountable. And that's very important.
That is very important. And, sometimes the interaction really don't have to be very eventful. I noticed when we did our promo, and we're friends, but the dynamic that happened was I wanted my way. So I passive aggressively, you know what I'm saying? Do people do that often? And is it still a way of getting what they want and making the person feel like they lost in the relationship or in the communication?
Well, I'll tell you, and this is where I'm sorry. Yeah.
To use a passive aggressive.
This is where. Well, this is where the issues of passive aggressiveness is a narcissistic trait. Doesn't mean you're full blown narcissist, but these are narcissistic traits. That's why it's such a slippery slope with that doggone term, because you can practice some narcissistic traits, but that doesn't mean you're a narcissist. These are things that you have to be accountable and responsible for how you communicate with your loved one. You have to be an active listener. You have to be willing to bend and be reasonable. You have to be willing in the very beginning to set boundaries in your relationship that are healthy and promote well-being between the both of you. And so it happens. We're all human beings and we're all subject to it. It never changes.
And that can be in any relationship, right? It can be friendship. It doesn't have to be a spouse or.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, at work, your platonic friends, your family members, these things, it can really, really happen. And that's why it's like, we're talking about pride and ego, and that's one facet, but it's the nature of who we are as human beings. A lot of men, because of social stereotypes, gender role stereotypes, believe that they have to be this stoic, powerful man that is detached from his emotions and feelings. And then with a woman, she has to be resilient, strong, and independent. At the same token, want to be dependent upon a man to love her and cherish her. So it is a clash, and it's causing this new wave of gender wars because it's really evolving. The way that men and women relate to one another is really evolving.
It really is. I was thinking about the way my mom raised us. She had some disappointments with raising us. So what she did was is keeping secret type stuff. Don't tell him where all the money is. Save you some money on the side. That type of, because of the experience that she had. So I think a lot of this stuff can be generational too. Because if you're told to do certain things and taught to take care of yourself, sometimes it's hard to break that pattern.
Oh, yeah. It's key that you mentioned that. We do suffer from generational curses because, the world, we learned the world from our caregiver's eyes, whether it's our natural mother and father, could be an adopted mother and father, could be a grandmother, a grandfather, an aunt, and uncle. So their perception of the world is then handed down to us. And so a lot of times, as we develop and as we grow, we end up being the person that actually breaks the generational curse. We actually break that generational curse that burdens us. This is when these conditions or abnormal behaviors become pathological. It's been a destructive path since you were a child. And most of the time when we're children, we're influenced by those that pose as a figure of influence, a caregiver. And, it definitely can change our behavior at a very young age.
And, raising my daughter, I didn't teach her that. She's seen that, what I had was mine and what her dad had was ours. It was all ours together. Our mama wasn't hiding money, saving it on the side, So you do have to, break those generational curses.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, we're bound. We can become very closed-minded in gender. We can become very rigid in gender. I'm a man, I'm supposed to act like this. I'm a woman, I'm supposed to act like this.
Yeah.
And truly, it's about cooperation.
Yes.
Coalescing and coexisting together. It's about ebb and flow. And a lot of times, if it's not developed early on, it can be challenging later on in the relationship.
You're right. You are so right. I think this is a great, great conversation that we're having. And I know you have a boot camp coming up where you're going to talk about relationships, in particular, narcissism. And we just spoke about narcissism. Can you tell us how in a relationship, when you're in a dynamic with a narcissist, is that ego a little bit different?
Well, there's a difference between ego and egotistical. Being ego-driven is healthy. I mean, a person all of us have an ego. We have a sense of self-worth and self-esteem. But when that self-worth and self-esteem is at the expense of other people and you center yourself around your self-worth, that's when it becomes egotistical. And then it starts, showing some narcissistic traits.
Okay.
So
Okay.
a lot of times, it's a clash because, you want to work hard to be the best that you can be. But at the same time, you also want to be respectful and understanding the potential of other people. And if you don't take the time to see the potential in everyone else, then you're going to kind of look down on another person because they don't meet your expectations. That's a term called projection. I'm going to project my perception of perfection on other people. And if they don't meet that level, I'm going to downgrade them. I'm not going to have any empathy for them. I'm not going to be compassionate, nor am I going to have sympathy. And that's generally what a narcissist does in many ways, too.
And so that makes the family very a toxic environment, right? When you're not communicating. Yeah.
Yeah. Because a lot of times with narcissism, the narcissist knows personal things about you.
Okay.
You actually love and care for the narcissist. So it's not just as simple as detaching when you have emotional ties to this person.
Yeah.
So it's even, with the boot camp, it's learning how to cope and deal with a narcissist. Because ultimately, if that narcissist is not willing to meet you at halfway, and they don't want to do the work to change, you're probably going to have to disengage from that person because narcissism can be very problematic.
Wow. I see that therapy is just necessary and really in all these different dynamics of relationships,
Yeah, absolutely. I think, therapy is no different than physical therapy. You don't want to wait until things are going bad to reach out to a therapist. Maintenance is important. Even in a relationship, we're talking about relationships tonight. Every 3 to 4 months, do a temperature check on your relationship. You might want a mediator, a therapist to come in and listen to both sides and give you guys a snapshot of how your progression is going. That's really important. Maintenance of a relationship is critical, maintaining your relationship because you would hope that you're in a long-term relationship. You don't want to be in a chronic situation where you're always breaking up with somebody. That can be,
and I'm sure that can be, very draining emotionally, as well as I'm sure it takes all kind of physical, ailments and stuff like that, like high blood pressure and, things like that,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because, stress is a killer and stress can affect a lot of the biological aspects of you, especially your temperament, your patience, your ability to focus and think. It affects everything. Your mental health is extremely important. And knowing how to cope when you're having stressful situations, it would add years to your life directly.
Well, Doc, I was thinking about raising our younger generation. Where do we start teaching? How do we start teaching the balance of, we teach our daughters to be strong, have great self-esteem, carry yourself well. And our boys, we teach them to be strong. And how do we, teach them to get along with each other and have that relationship of communication instead of dominance?
Well, I think one thing is parents have a tendency to overwhelm their children. They have a tendency to force their ways onto their children. They have a tendency to not promote autonomy and independence at a young age, a sense of self-worth and well-being. We have a tendency to impose our will on our children because we think we know what's right for them. But ultimately, the child is going to grow, become an adult, and ultimately make their own decisions. Most of the time as parents, we just hope that we can instill our children to have a fundamental knowledge of what's best for them. What's right, what's wrong. That's the best we can do because our children who eventually become adults have a right to own their identity. And I think really as early as age 0, you start developing a child's independence. So it becomes natural for that child. Teaching, give diversity training to the child so they know how to adjust to different cultures, different people. So they're not closed-minded to the world. Subject your child to the world, outside of their home. Let them see things that are going to give them a worldview at a very young age, because at that young age, they're very impressionable. And that's when you really want to be able to feed them information that is going to mold their development.
And also seeing great examples in the house, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I would agree.
Well, this has been a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you, Doc. another great episode.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Another one, packed with information.
Yeah.
Been a great conversation. I'm hoping that we're really helping a lot of people out there. This is what, we love to do outside of, podcasts. We really care about people. We want to help people. So hopefully,
that's right.
Guys, please comment, in the comment sections, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on Facebook, TikTok, of course, on Spotify. You can find us on Spotify. Give us some feedback. Maybe it's something you want us to talk about. Maybe that's it. We'll definitely field it for you. So we appreciate feedback and interaction. We really, really do. And we definitely look forward to seeing you guys, November 3rd. It's going to be a wellness boot camp around mental health, specifically dealing with narcissism and dealing with a narcissist. So tickets are going to be available actually Tuesday, same day, this Tuesday, the same day that this podcast airs. So take advantage of that. Make sure you get those tickets, and please follow, of course, my lovely host, Bridget Gibson. She does phenomenal work. Can you kind of tell them where everyone can find you and reach out to you and interact with you?
Oh, yeah. I'm on all the podcast platforms under Morning Soulshine. You can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. I'm just everywhere. But I'm Absolutely. Just so excited to be here. The Alpha Mindset. This is wonderful. Thank you so much for having me a part of your team.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And guys, we appreciate you very much so. We look forward to talking to you guys again on the next Tuesday. So you guys have a wonderful and productive week. We'll talk to you.
Thank you.